Good afternoon. The seats at the front are very comfortable. They don't have germs, and you are allowed to sit in them. And from the stage, it looks great when there are people at the front.
Recording in progress.
Very good. Thank you for dragging yourself away from coffee. Was there cake? No cake? Oh, all right. Chai. Okay, chai. I was told no chai in the Preston, but rules are made to be broken. Chai drinkers. A conversation we're about to have is chai and chat. I'm going to ask you to sit, come nearer the front. We love to see people at the front. I won't pick on you. I promise that. So we can have chai and chat. If you work in fragility, conflict, violence settings, you know that you have to think out of the box. You have to think differently. Where are you getting your inspiration, your innovation from? It's why I love this session, because we are going out of the box. We are going out of the ordinary to look at art and writing and culture and how that informs our work. Dr. Myriam J. Chancy is a scholar and a novelist. Please welcome her. She walks on the stage and sits down. Dr. Chancy is now on book number 11 and 12, but she writes fiction and also non-fiction. What Storm, What Thunder was voted the best book of 2021. And Margaret Atwood, who apparently is some small novelist you may have heard of, a little bit independent, she says of that book, stunning. I want you to know how brilliant Dr. Chancy is. And now we're going to have chat and chai together.
Thank you, Femi. What a great introduction. Thank you for everyone for being here.
Myriam, you have been writing since you were a teenager.
Publishing since then, yes.
Publishing?
Yeah.
How did you know that's what you wanted to do?
I didn't know that I wanted to do that. I just was always writing, reading since I was a small child, just very interested in letters. And so when I was a teenager, I started publishing in Canada. So I was born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and then emigrated to Canada with my family, of course, in Quebec City, so French Canada, and then eventually went to Winnipeg, which has the largest French community outside of Quebec. And that's where we started. And I just started publishing my work at that time.
And publishing, first of all, nonfiction?
Both. I was writing some fiction and I was writing some nonfiction, and that has followed me through my career.
And there's a set of themes and stories that you go for, issues that you go for.
Sure.
I want you to tell us those different areas, because I think it's helpful for us in the room.
Yeah, so I actually started out in architecture, which a lot of people don't know, and couldn't do the math. So I ended up in English, which happens to a lot of English professors. And I really focused, well, initially I was trained in British, Canadian, American literature into my PhD. I did my master's actually on James Baldwin, so I'm a specialist on James Baldwin. And then when I was finished with comps, doing my PhD, I realized that I had not worked on Caribbean literature. So I ended up writing a book on Caribbean women writers in exile, Anglophone Caribbean writers, as well with Haiti, doing some comparative work with Haitian women writers. And from there, I just kind of took off. So mostly working on gender issues, which is, I think, why I'm here to talk also about the ways I think about what is happening in terms of gender-based violence in the Haitian context. I wrote the first and only women's book on Haitian women's literature, which emerged during the US occupation of Haiti in 1915 to 1934. So that book looked at that literature through to 1994, when the first book by Haitian women started appearing by Edwidge Dandika and Anne-Christine Dadeski. And then I was also writing fiction, but the novels took longer to come out. They started to come out in the UK in the early 2000s, which then brings us to What Storm, What Thunder, which appeared in 2021.
What Storm, What Thunder is about the 2010 earthquake, but it's
That's right.
novelized.
Yes.
How do you decide when you write, this is nonfiction, this is going to be fiction?
Well, the way I think about fiction is that it's everything that you wish you could have said as an academic or professional, but can't say. So it's really the surplus, it's the excess, it's those things that really keep you up at night or keep you troubled, but there are no ready answers for. And the fiction is a way to address those things in a way that I can't do as an academic or as a nonfiction writer. So the earthquake is a very good example because I was tapped as a specialist on Haitian women and children to talk about what were best practices after the earthquake. You know, what should practitioners do? And as you all know, a lot of people went into Haiti after 2010, a lot of people who were unprepared for what they would find on the ground, not only in terms of the level of cataclysm, the death toll, the infrastructures, you know, the buildings that had fallen, all of that, but just the way the society functions. They were just unprepared. So I went on the road for months into years, giving talks that became the subject of Harvesting Haiti, which is my nonfiction book on this matter, a lot of op-eds that I wrote about what to do, what not to do, what grassroots people wanted, to be done on their behalf. But the response, the response is immediate when you give a talk, but it's not sustained, right? I wrote the novel, and I'm still talking to people about this novel in 2026. Right. I've had another novel come out since then, Village Weavers, which is on a completely different topic, but people still want to talk about What Storm, What Thunder. So the impact has been much more visceral because one of the things you can also do in fiction is really bring alive the human story. You know, the faces behind those people that, post-colonialists would call are massified, that become a mass, and we only talk about the people, the Haitians, the Rwandans, whatever it may be. But if you can start putting, human realities, to what is happening on the ground, which you can do in a novel, and what I did in What Storm, What Thunder was to tell the story of the earthquake through 10 narrative voices. That different ages, different backgrounds, different genders, different socioeconomic positioning, and have those individuals stand in for the over 250,000 people who actually died, right, in that earthquake. The death toll is over 300,000 and counting. And, the 1.7 million people who were left insecure, food insecure, house insecure, and so on. So it was a way for people to feel what had happened and what that might feel like for them. And I live in California now. The ways in which people measured on the ground which buildings could be saved, not saved, actually came out of California protocol. So one of the things that was interesting to me is that living in California, where people are always afraid of the big one, suddenly they started, people in California started thinking, oh, what if this happens here? What happens? Of course, the infrastructure issues are different, but you have to start thinking, how would you take care of your neighbor? What would you rely on? How would you want things to be rebuilt? And some of those questions have been answered in places like California and other countries where those infrastructures are in place. But for Haiti, they have not been answered. They have not been answered adequately. And I think that's the question that the novel animates. Why is that?
Will you read for us?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to read you a paragraph that I think illustrates what I just was talking about. And this is in the voice of Tafia, who is a 14, 15-year-old girl who is just thinking about, who's going to be her best friend, the next dance, the first boyfriend, and just trying to understand her life as it is. And is caught up in what happens during the earthquake and ends up in an IDP camp. And so I'll just read you this passage. I walked through the camp, watching as each person acted out their rituals of a day against all the despair and fear they felt. The smallest of the children were playing together. Old men traded dominoes on boards laid across their knees. There was nothing else to do but keep an eye on one's dry corner of the world to sleep in before having to start the search for food, water, loved ones. It was hard to believe that only a few weeks before, all I had been thinking about was school matters, going to the clubs, and whether I would have friends or a date for a school dance. It was hard to believe that my life and that of my family was reduced to a small tent, no belongings except the blue box, and waiting. It was hard to believe that Tati was gone and would never return. It was hard to believe that only a few weeks ago, all I had cared about were things like my name and soap opera storylines and getting invited out by popular girls, and that now we were in a telenovela ourselves, hoping to awaken from a dream. Most of the time, all there was to do was think about the life we used to have, the life we used to want to escape, which now I realized was so much better than what we had been reduced to waiting in the camp. Thank you.
Without focusing on international aid, it's very present in that book.
Yes. Yeah.
What is your perspective on, I'm not going to say development because that's too big, but crisis and aid coming in because there's a crisis, natural disaster, for instance?
Ooh, it's such a big question, especially for a space like Haiti. And in the novel, this is a question that keeps returning, and the different characters have different perspectives. Two of the characters are a married couple who are accountants. So my mother was an accountant, so I know a lot about accounting. And so the husband, Olivier, who ends up in a different IDP camp, ruminates on this and the numbers. And this is a few months after the earthquake, and he knows how much millions have come in. And he's thinking, oh, if only they had given, let's say, 30, 40,000 to each affected family, what could each of those families have done, you know? And that's a layman's way of thinking, where did all that money go? And of course, by now we know that very little of the money that went into Haiti stayed in Haiti. And this is not about the corruption of the government, which is what people, will say over and over again, because actually less than 1% of the funding that went into Haiti for rebuilding was given to the Haitian government. And of that 1%, actually good things came out of it. So we have to think, where did that money go? And so in most situations of cataclysm, when aid comes in, it comes in through the same channels that colonial channels came in, post-colonial channels, neo-colonial channels keep coming. We have to change the way those structures operate. And in Haiti, the answer is working with the grassroots. The grassroots is still what is working throughout the country. Even now, in the condition of instability that Port-au-Prince finds itself in, when you talk to people on the ground, they will say that what we call the Conbit system, KONBIT, which is an African-based collectivity system, is what is working and keeping people fed without currency. So imagine that, people who are feeding each other without currency. And so we have to think very differently about what does it mean then to invest in a place like Haiti, which I think in other ways has given so much to the world.
I'm thinking about some of the vocabulary that we would use in this space, in the Fragility Forum, resilience, fragility. Yeah. But as you speak from somebody who is from Haiti or from any region or country that is considered to be unstable, fragile, that's not how you speak about your home.
No.
Can you teach us?
Well, so I know, when Wet Storm came out, a lot of people, I did a lot of interviews, NPR and so forth, and the word resiliency always comes up, like Haitians are resilient. And I say, well, no, I think we're persistent. We persist, we resist, are we resilient? Because resiliency has embedded in it, at least for a layperson, this idea that you can withstand anything that comes your way. Whatever is thrown at a Haitian or, somebody from an impoverished country, they're able to make do, they're able to keep going. And one of the things I tried to illustrate in What Storm is that that is not always true. Some people do not make it. Some people do take their lives. Some people do give up. And so there are a number of ways in which people never come back from these kinds of cataclysms. And we know, of course, in terms of a death toll, people just died, right? Whole families were wiped out. So I think we need to shift away from this idea of resilience to an idea of how do we reinforce the structures of a people, of a culture that are working so that they can, in fact, do for themselves. A great example would be the agricultural sector, right? Haiti had to agree to lift their tariffs so that they, could then have all kinds of things dumped into their system, namely rice. What sector did that completely wipe out? It was the rice sector of Haiti, which was it's a very good grain. I still come across, Caribbean people from across the Caribbean of a certain age who say they remember when their mothers would buy Haitian rice because it was more nutritional. Who were those farmers? They were women. The majority of Haiti's rice farmers were women. And so they were considered, a group that could be, removed from thought. And so what I try to think about is how has Haiti been made fragile by these practices? How can we strengthen Haiti in a way that would make it possible for the people to thrive? So reinstating the tariffs, making sure that the markets are not flooded by foreign produce, letting the people produce for themselves, bringing back the educational sector so that it is robust, so that people can, go to school in their own country and then continue into university as they used to. The Haitian system used to be so robust that you could go directly from Haiti to Montreal to France, as my parents did, and continue, and thrive wherever you wanted to. All of that has disappeared. And part of the reason it has disappeared is because there has been an investment in Haiti as a low-cost labor market that does not reinvest in its population. And that is not the fault of the people on the ground. It is the fault of how this system of comparable advantages is set up globally.
We understand so much through the characters, what the characters say. So it's not even, this is what we should do better. The characters are just living their lives and they're suffering or they're thriving, depending on where they are in terms of some of the areas that you cover: wealth, poverty, gender-based violence, which sounds super heavy, me just listing it. But when you go with the characters on their journey, you're experiencing that. Are you basing them on people and stories that you've heard, real stories?
Yes and no. Yes and no. So, as I said earlier, after the earthquake, I was giving a lot of talks. I went back to Haiti in person for several years. I was working on different projects, getting resources meted out, making sure people met each other. Sometimes people, even in Port-au-Prince, did not know each other, who should have known each other. Beverly Bell wrote a wonderful book about, interviewing people on the ground, and we were in touch. So I was hearing a lot. And then when I was giving talks, there were often Haitians who had been displaced by the earthquake, who would come, be invited to, sell their wares at conferences such as this one. Often did not speak English, but I would talk and they would say, we don't know what you said, but we felt the emotion, and I would hear about what they had gone through. But I think everybody's story is their own. And so I never take anything from a personal, point of view, but I'm informed by it. So in the novel, for example, there's a boy who's just turned 11 after the earthquake. His name is Jonas, and he's the child of the two accountants I mentioned. And he has a crushed limb. and he has to go through an amputation without anesthesia, which was very common in the first weeks after the earthquake, and he will eventually die of gangrene, which is something that occurred. And
this is a story spoiler, Dr. Chancy.
I'm so sorry. But these things happen.
Yeah.
These things happen. What's integral to the way I tell the story is for you to understand from his point of view what it felt like to be that 11-year-old boy who had just had a birthday, who was just wandering through the marketplace, who was just wondering what the next day would bring. And so I don't think it's quite a spoiler in the sense that it's about experiencing the world through the character's point of view, wherever they were in Haiti or outside. So another character is a taxi driver who watches what happens in his hometown from afar and doesn't quite know, what, and he's Tafia's brother. And eventually it's Tafia, the 14-year-old, who will have to inform him, teach him about Haiti again, So that's the idea of a novel, is how can I bring you as a reader along so that you understand what has happened on, the ground for individuals in such a way that you will be changed forever and you will want to know these characters. So they should feel as if they are real, but none of them are actual people.
I'm just going to pause for a moment. If you would like to talk to Myriam, we have 10 minutes in this room together. There's a microphone there in the middle. I'm very generously sharing my questions with you if you would like to. If not, I will continue on. If you stand there 1 minute before the end, I will thank you for standing up and then ask you to sit down again. So we have got 10 minutes, okay, together if you would like to answer questions. Pain, the way that you share pain and suffering is, dare I say, beautifully written, but also excruciating. Like the young boy, not spoiler alert because we know he's dead, but his leg is sawn off with no anesthesia. Yeah. And it's just, when you're reading something and you're like, like that is exactly how you made me feel as a reader, as they're sawing through his leg. How do you make those decisions about what pain you share? Right. There also, there's an incident where a woman is gang raped. And again, excruciating. But the way in which you write it, the decisions that you made that were very intentional.
Yeah.
Please share.
Yeah, I think, I hope you'll read the novel. The idea is that I want to make real and clear that gender-based violence is something, as you all know, that many women and children, and also men, are experiencing in these contexts. And it would not be true to write a novel where these things are not portrayed or not represented. But how I do it is such that the decision that I've made is that the reader should not encounter those traumas in a way that is traumatizing to them. And especially if you're reading the novel and feeling that these characters are real for you, but does not feel like I am re-traumatizing the character on the page. What I do is give you the perspective of the character about that experience. And so they are, to some degree, in control of how that story is told, in the same way that if you are a practitioner on the ground and you are taking stories of people, who have experienced gender-based violence and you want it to be told in their own words, then this is also how, as a novelist, I am writing this on the page so that you're experiencing it from the victim's point of view in the way that they are able to tell you of their trauma, but also within the limits and the confines that they want to impose upon that story.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I'm Sahiti. I typically work with data in conflict situations, and I have a similar question, but in the context of nonfiction. So I often report the number of people that died in a specific country because of XYZ causes, typically in the week after a conflict has occurred. And there was one request where I was asked to humanize the figures, and I had the real estate of maybe 50 to 100 words. How do you approach humanizing death and figures about death in conflict situations in a nonfiction setting?
Yeah. That's a great question. So I am also a literary critic, so I do analysis of literary texts, and then I also write nonfiction essays. And so sometimes what I do is I insert myself into the text in terms of a personal narrative. So when I went back to Haiti, I talked to people, and if that person was willing to have their name included, I would ask, can I cite you in this essay? And then I would retell the story that they had told me in their own words. So that's one way. In terms of people who obviously have passed away, I think is putting a name to that person, naming them as a person, right? I was listening to some coverage of things that are happening around the country right now, where somebody was in detention and they were talking about how officers were calling people in detention bodies as opposed to people. So the language one uses can also be humanizing, talking about people rather than, just deaths, putting a name to a body, telling that body's story, not as a body, but as a person. I hope that helps.
Thank you. If you have a question, please go now. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Courtney Vaughn, and thank you, Dr. Maria. Is it Maria?
Miriam.
Miriam, and thank you also, moderator. And I forgot your name. Shame on me.
Oprah.
Oprah. Okay. So I would like to know from the author, is there anything that you can say, and you may have covered that in your just say your novel, I've not read it, that you can say to government in terms of their responsibility to probably create some sort of fiscal space? We know that the Caribbean region in particular, because that's where we're looking from. And you can hear my accent. I'm from Jamaica, and people say historically, once you have a big bang in Haiti, the big bang is coming in Jamaica by way of an earthquake. It has not yet gotten there. Thank God for that. But in terms of creating the fiscal space to support these sorts of catastrophe, catastrophe, okay, the activities such as
I'm going to push you for the question.
So that's really the question. Yeah. And again, we know that the external resources come into a country when you have these situations, but is there something you can say as it relates to better management of those funds or resources to ensure that more of it gets on the ground?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think the issue for Haiti is really that people are not trusted. The government is not trusted, but then the government has been interfered with, many times, intervened on many times. And so the idea that the Haitian government is too corrupt to be trusted is problematic. There are sectors within the government which can be trusted and have demonstrated that over decades. The agricultural ministry, the ministry for women have always demonstrated that they are responsive and responsible with their funds and with how they treat people on the ground under their ministries. So there are sectors of the government that can be looked at specifically. But again, I think it's about investing in the grassroots, groups that have done a lot with very, very little and continue to demonstrate a capacity to respond to their constituencies in responsible ways. I think that has not been explored fully, and people continue to do what they can with very little. And so why hasn't that been looked at, in a more concerted way? And so I do focus on that a little bit in the novel in terms of demonstrating how people organize by themselves and how they're able to construct collectivities. For example, men's groups developing in the IDP camps to protect the women, from gender-based violence. That happened, but not a lot of people talk about it.
This is the final question that will be asked on the microphone. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Hello, I'm Hamza. Always a happy day when the inimitable Mr. Baldwin is invoked. Drawing on his genealogy and perhaps reading a little bit too much in between the lines of what you said about comparable advantage, what message, and drawing specifically on that genealogy, what message would you like to leave this audience with?
From Baldwin.
I'm turning a particular screw here.
Well, listen, Baldwin wrote a lot of nonfiction and a lot of fiction. In his time, he was a best-selling novelist, and then he was derided by critics for decades after. And now we're all reading Baldwin again, right, as a kind of a prophet. Baldwin was very good at making his readers think about the political implications of being bystanders rather than actors, and at not looking at the entire society as a whole. You know, everyone, whether you were upper class, middle class, poor, black, white, something else, of different genders. And so he was ahead of his time. So what I try to do in my novels, but also in my nonfiction, is to put a light on those sectors that are less looked at, and to invite people into a conversation, especially with Haiti, that says, look at this, the beauty of this entire culture. One thing that gets looked over in The Fire Next Time, I'm a professor, so I'm going to go into professor mode for a minute. I teach The Fire Next Time. There's a beautiful passage in The Fire Next Time that a lot of people overlook, where Baldwin says that what those of us who are advantaged in American society miss about Harlem is the beauty of how people make do with very little. I'm paraphrasing. And that's what I would have to say about Haiti. It is a beautiful country, not just in terms of what is still present, in the natural world, but in how people are able to conduct themselves with dignity with very, very little. And so on the outside, it might look like people have nothing, but on the inside, they actually have everything. It is a very, very rich culture. And I think this is something that infuses my work the way it did Baldwin's.
Thank you. My friend is the optimist. She's hovering by the microphone. Come and sit in the front seat here. You will ask your question one-on-one, which is the best way to have a question answered, but not on the microphone, because I am wrapping up. But thank you. Perseverance. Perseverance right here.
That could be the word we replace resilience with.
Yes, perseverance. All right, so I love that we actually now have a Fragility Forum book club. Like this is what we do, which is a beautiful thing. And so for the practitioners who work in FCV, who are in this room, give us one nonfiction book of yours. Okay. You're looking like, oh, what would that be? One of yours. And also a fiction book of yours that will really help us understand our work, do it better. What are those two titles?
So Harvesting Haiti, which I have up here on the podium, because those are my essays on the post-earthquake situation. And for the young lady who was asking about how to humanize the numbers, it is a more academic work, but it does humanize those numbers, but it is about the numbers in terms of the post-earthquake situation and the cost of that period to the present day, the near present day. Of course, I recommend What Storm, but I do have a new novel out named Village Weavers, which is about the
Beautiful. I'm enjoying it greatly.
But if you don't know about the 1940s in Haiti, so the pre-dictatorship period, which was a thriving period for Haiti, a Haiti that a lot of people have forgotten, that's what the novel focuses on, is the beauty of that period, and then how the world changed for Haitians through the Duvalier period to the early 2000s. So I invite you to check that out and learn more about Haiti.
You have a whole book list and homework to do. Dr. Myriam J. Chancy, thank you for spending time with us. We appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Thank you for coming, everyone.
My sister, my friend, come and ask your question one-on-one. No, here. Hello. This way. Oh, which one? The practitioner sessions start in 15 minutes. So please make your way to your practitioner sessions, and thank you for being part of Chai and Chat.